Good. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Moore. This is Concord's Town Meeting Study Committee. The time is 7:02. The date is April 22nd, and this is the beginning of our committee meeting. Our agenda tonight, public comment. We have no minutes available to approve, so that will go quickly. Basically, we're focusing on a report tonight, reviewing the draft of the briefing book, reviewing the draft of the committee report, discussing additional materials to post adjacent to the reports, potential outreach in May, and what's going to happen at town meeting from us. And then if we have time, we'll talk about some data stuff as well. So with that, I see one member of the public, Ned.
Call the word.
We are. Well, but you have to do. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what? Let's get my slide. Yeah, man. Oh man. All right. So Keith Bergman, thank you for clerking tonight.
Sure.
Let's go through the roll. Keith, please.
Present.
I know that Katie Bresnick is not available tonight. Kristen Haggerty, please.
Here.
Alice Kaufman.
I'm here.
Eric Moore, present. Parashar Patel.
Yeah.
Thank you. Phil Swain.
Here.
Thank you. Chase Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. And Eric Van Loon, please.
Here.
Thank you. Keith, thank you for that reminder. That's what happens when I don't start from the beginning. All right. Do we have any comments from the public tonight?
From this public, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, passing through minutes. I've got a set of minutes outstanding. Phil, you from the 25th, and Alice, you from the 7th, in due course. So updates. Tonight, report working session. We'll talk about the possibility of the meeting on the 29th, but it's just a possibility. My understanding is the deadline for the briefing book to be done and submitted to Shannon is May 5th. We have a meeting scheduled for the 6th to talk about any supplements. We'll review the committee report and plan for our work in May and for the town meeting. I'd like to do a lessons learned on the 19th. What have we learned about our work as a committee? I don't know what that is. And then, of course, we've got town meeting on the June 2nd. So moving right in, again, the report.
I'm sorry, can you go back? On the second, you have three different things. The town meeting presentation, the Clippers motion, and Article 27. Are these three distinct things?
Yes.
Are we going to talk about it later today?
Yeah. And we'll hear from Carmen a bit about that too. So the briefing book. Thank you, Eric Van Loon. Thank you, Alice Kaufman. It's a chunk of work done under pressure, done well. I know what it's like. So thank you. So the status is that we have a draft of the briefing book. Well, it's not the briefing book, right? It's the element, the component of the report that goes into the briefing book. And so, Eric, just let us, can you just give us a sense as to your read on the state of the document?
The 5 pages for the briefing book or the whole thing?
No, the 5 pages for the briefing book.
I'm personally happy with it the way it is, with a few small definite improvements that I heard from you about today. I haven't gotten it went out on Friday. We were all walking around on Saturday. We were all recovering Sunday. So not surprising. I didn't expect to receive anything, and I haven't heard anything. And but Parashar was
just one thing.
Yeah, I'd like to go around the table.
Yeah, so in the briefing book, there were sort of 5 other recommendations. Right, we had 3 major ones and then 5 other ones, I think.
Yeah, it became 6.
It became 6 in the body, but it's still 5 in the briefing book version. So we should just make sure they're both 6 and 6.
It was I think that Eric sent out a corrected version later on Friday, because partway through.
We should. I think there was still, and then the order, I think.
Yeah.
There's one order, and then the order where we discuss the detailed recommendations. So
yeah.
Well, that's all. It's not your stuff.
So
the one I'm working from, there's 6.
I see.
Okay.
So just to review it, and my way, right? So I'm gonna assert that the reader who's looking at this is already interested in town meeting, right? They get what replaces the classic warrant mailing, and they're people who are already interested in town meeting. And you know, my questions, right, these are sort of due diligence questions, to sign off, towards signing off on what we have. If the voter reads only this about our work, is there something missing from the briefing book report? Because it may be, you know, this is the only time they engage with our stuff. Is what is in there accurate? Is it credible? Is it responsive to what I mean by that? Do we show in the text that's in the briefing book that we've listened to the public's concerns about town meeting? And finally, is it clear? Is there other things that are confusing to read? So let me just go around. Chase, let me start with you, if I may. What are your impressions of the briefing book report, the 5-pager?
I thought it was good. I really did. I shared the, you know, sort of ultra shortened down version. I don't know if there's any value to having something that's 2 or 3 pages versus 5, but I thought it was concise. I thought it was a good recap. And I think for an interested audience that it's probably the appropriate length.
Good. And so no critical issues in other words, it's all good.
No, I didn't see anything leap off. If the goal is to have something really fast that people would read, then 5 pages probably is too much, but I don't know that is the goal. So
it's really 1+4 if you want to look at it in terms of the cover page and then the other 4 pages. Good, thank you. I'll go around the room. Keith, may I go to you, please? Just again, comments on the briefing book report.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy with this briefing book content. I had a couple of chances to see different versions as it was being written, and then I set it down, and then it hit me what was missing, and it was something, and it's in here now. It's the latest bullet, but that bullet is that we should make better use of the pre-town meeting public hearings.
Mhm.
And the reason why that cut, you would think it would go without saying, but I guess the memo didn't get out to the 3 committees that held hearings, because 2 of them just went back to square one and said, we're only critiquing slideshows. This is not a place for debate.
Yeah.
Or talking about the article.
That's my bad. I
Yeah.
communicated it verbally at the chair's breakfast, but
Yeah.
I didn't send
Yeah.
the memo.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I stood up at the first public hearing that I attended, the planning board. I just stood up. Well, what I first did was the moderator was in the front row. I was hiding in the back. So I sat down next to her and said, I have problems with what I just heard from the chair. Is it okay if I say something? And so I stood up and took the mic, on the article that was then being discussed, if only because I had every intention of giving testimony that did not just critique an article that was coming later.
Mhm.
And I had that discussion with the planning board a year ago, when they cut me off and wouldn't let me. I was there to tell them that I support the MBTA community zoning, and they didn't want to hear it. Which I thought they should. And so I stood up and took the microphone and just said, we've been talking about it. Sorry if the word didn't get out, but we really would like this to be an opportunity for issues to be put on the table, and maybe even resolved, so that we're not all hearing about it for the first time at town meeting, and then we're unnecessarily dealing on the floor with issues that we could have resolved before we got there. And the rest of that planning board meeting went just fine. It was long. There's a lot of good discussion that everyone got to make, and the purpose was accomplished. I didn't have to say anything in the finance committee meeting, because it was just from the get-go. It was, the chair said, this is where we want to hear input on town meeting. We want to talk about the merits of the article so that we get all that out there. I didn't attend I was tired on the select board night, didn't attend in person, didn't even watch it on Zoom.
Yeah,
And 3 days later, when I saw it on, the video replay, I was disappointed
yeah,
that we were back to limiting to critique. So at that point, I said, well, I guess it doesn't go without saying. And since it's not in the report draft that I just read, I really think it needs to be in there because it's a critical way to make town meeting better. So that was my little contribution to them.
good, good. So again, it sounds good in terms of what's.
Yes,
good,
so
thank you.
I'm fine.
Good, Phil Swain, let me go to you, please. How's the briefing book material?
I thought it looked great.
Good,
And so I have no substantive comments. I have a couple of typographical things that I found, which I can give to whoever is the next scrivener. But otherwise, I thought it was the right length, the right sort of information, including being credible and showing that we did listen. So no real substantive comments.
good, thank you, thank you. Parashar, anything to add?
Nope, and by the way, I was looking at the packet version, which had 5 bullets, so I wasn't going to square it. No, I thought it was good.
Good, thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
I really appreciate all the work to get this concise. I don't have any substantive comments right now.
Good, let me go to Carmen online, please.
Hi, thanks so much for everyone's work on this. I know how much harder it is to write short than to write long, and I have no substantive comments. I thought that it did a great job. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Let me go to the public. Any comments on the draft briefing book material? Ned, please.
Ned Perry, 362 Bedford Street.
Yeah,
If I may have a little latitude on what you're discussing, I would like to support Keith, and I just wish he hadn't been so tired as not to show up for the select board hearing, so that the chair of the select board might have been understanding of where you were going. And I also will say in the planning board, very much in keeping with what you just talked about, one of the articles which may not be moved because of what came up at that hearing, and I actually stepped out and spoke with the possible petitioners and Public Works, and I think we have that one off because of a good discussion leading up to and at the hearing. So thank you very much for supporting that. I'm 100% responsible. Thank you very much.
thank you, thank you. Great, for my comments, yeah, I think it'll serve. I think, I continue to find ticky-tack things there, and, I'll keep coming back to you. So what are the next, David Allen, please.
Forgive me, I'm unclear. I'm interested in the clickers section. Is that relevant to the briefing book? I doubt it.
So there's a small section, so the draft we have 2 documents, right? There's the one that's gonna go, the 5-pager that's gonna go into the briefing book. And then the committee report, which in effect begins with those 5 pages, and then has another section about the rationale for the recommendations.
I think that's probably where
Okay.
my comment.
Good, we'll come back to you on that. Good, thank you. So again, we've got a deadline of around May 4th, thereabouts, but really the sooner the better now. So Eric, we talked about, possibly basically you finishing this off in whatever form. And delivering that, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'd like to do it a lot sooner than May 4. If people were willing, I'd like to say anything you got, 24 hours to forever hold your peace, and then
Okay.
I incorporate things and how it goes.
I would be, because it's me, right? I'd be happy to look at your next draft, just as a QA on that, before sending it off. But on the whole, I think, you've incorporated the things that I've communicated, and I feel confident that we're in very good shape with that. So then we'll leave it to you to finish the briefing book. Thank you. We don't need to vote on that, I don't think. And it sounds as though we've got consensus on what we have. So again, thank you.
Okay.
So this also means we don't need a meeting on the 29th to sign off on something, because we've just done that, so. So moving ahead to the committee report. Again, you know, the first 5 pages of the committee report are what's also in the briefing book. You know, this reader's probably already read the briefing book material. And, you know, what do they want? What's the reader's experience? I assume, you know, they're gonna be interested in more depth, you know, seeing the rationales, especially for some of the bigger things that we talked about. And again, the same rubric for the report. Is it accurate? Is it credible? Is it responsive? Again, does it show that we've listened? And perhaps is it illuminating, right? You know, is it interesting? You know, why didn't we do some of the obvious things? So again, it's the same question. I'd like to go around again. And sorry for the feeling of repetition, but you know, there's a lot more material there. And again, it's a different document. But rather than just polling everyone, I'll ask for any comments for this version 6 of the committee report. Any red flags? I've got a couple. Any red flags or other things that make you feel pro or con about what we have?
So just one red, not a red flag. On the Australian ballot one, we've got very nice flowery reasons why we don't think it's a good idea. But the practical reason of what happens if articles don't get approved at the election and you're 2 or 3, 4 weeks away from the start of the fiscal year,
Yeah,
we don't mention that at all.
Good point.
Okay, we ought to lead with that one.
yeah.
For all practical purposes, this is why it doesn't work.
So New Hampshire, thank you. So New Hampshire, maybe Phil's gonna say this, has a lot of kind of rules around what happens, and fallback, basically. If the budget doesn't pass, then we fall back to something else, like the previous year or whatever. But it's really complicated.
We ought to say that that either needs to be developed or whatever that is, but there's a practical element missing.
Sure.
I think that the most that I heard was when this was proposed at the hearing last year, and the town clerk spoke a little bit about it, that was the most illuminating about like the things to be cautious about. And it would have to do with timing, and it was logistically extremely complex, not even the what if it doesn't pass, but even just setting it up.
Right.
I'd say that's where, I don't know if the town clerk can provide a little 1-paragraph rationale for the challenges that it would propose.
Well, the timing, I think you can always shift calendars, right? So you can overcome that, but the question of what happens in my mind,
Right.
if it requires complex set of rules, we don't have them, we need to develop them, so I think just talking about some of those practical elements up front would be good.
The only recent comparison to the way, I guess, Vermont functions if their town meeting doesn't approve it is whatever, and I wasn't paying close attention during, you know, I was newly retired and was paying as little attention as I could to town government during COVID. But when the town meeting was held in September, there were some rules in place that governed how the state viewed July, August, and September. And I don't know, could it have been a 1/12 rule or what the, you know, in
I
Congress?
think it was.
Is it continuing resolution or something?
I think that's exactly what happened, we had to continue spending the money one, probably for the prior fiscal year.
Yeah,
Until the new budget got
yeah.
authorized.
And I don't, so to the extent, I don't know that we can infer that that's what this proposal would have led to, but it would, but even in, it was that 2020? That the state said, well, you can do it up until September, I think, but they didn't say that it was open-ended, that you could just continue to
That's right.
do 1/12. So I don't think that even though that's what might happen in one case, I don't think that it would be the rule or that it would be reasonable to ask for that rule. I think the practical answer is you don't have a budget.
Right.
The practical answer is that all the things you need to do to get to certified free cash as of July 1st and get ready to set the tax rate, which you could do as soon as you're ready. You know, that that they crippled your ability to send out tax bills. And
At a minimum,
So-
you need clarification from the
Yeah.
state
Right,
about what happens, and I think we ought to just mention,
so for the report, right, it's really complicated.
yes, exactly.
That's the
So,
message.
yeah, I
It's really
don't think we have to get into the,
It works
It
somehow in
can.
New Hampshire, it works somehow in Vermont. We need to figure, as a state, we need to figure it
Right.
out, but the key message for the report is, it's really complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or the key message is that, the next step is to develop the rules that guide the implementation of the best ballot
yeah.
question.
Right.
would be,
So that,
yeah,
I think that may be sufficient, but maybe. if
the
we want
rules
to-
and the calendar shift, that would have to
yeah,
occur.
the mechanisms.
And that may take time,
Yes,
Yeah, good,
and absent an approved ballot question in time for fiscal year, continuing resolution of the level funding
yeah,
is expected.
but this is probably what I said, no, to your point.
So I think it's two sentences maybe?
yes.
You know?
Maybe
I
even
mean, I
more.
agree with the idea that it's a very important point and it's not in there.
Yeah,
And, but I also got comments from a number of people, which I happen to agree with. Even if there were a bunch of rules, I think there's a lot of reasons why it would be a very, very bad idea.
Sure, yeah, sure,
Fundamental.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
But
good.
that first piece of it.
Phil, let me just go to you. Any other comments on the committee report?
Yeah, I concur. We should add something about the fact that it's complicated and will be extremely complicated and impractical. So I actually drafted something to insert. I can just give that to you. One sentence, one sentence with two clauses.
Ooh, two clauses, Phil.
Process again.
Anyways,
Yeah, so on the committee report as a whole, yeah,
oh no, first of all, I think it's excellent and I have no substantive comments. Actually, a couple of substantive comments. There's a suggestion here on the Australian ballot that we do a more extensive analysis of this concept may appear as a supplement. I don't think that's a good idea. I think we explained concisely why we don't recommend it here in, half a page, and that's all we need. I don't think it's necessary to have a more extensive discussion because if that, I think to get into it in more detail would almost raise it. And I don't think I think we've basically dismissed it here with appropriate. If we try to explain it further, it might even cause people to think, oh, maybe we should do it.
so we'll come back, thank you, we'll come back to supplements with your comment in mind.
Yeah, and then I had one other substantive thing. So I thought the suggestions for managing the meetings, meeting efficiency and so on for the moderators were excellent as well. And there's just one, a good suggestion. The moderator should intervene immediately and firmly with immediate ability to mute a microphone to encourage constructive commentary throughout the deliberation. I think we should add or to avoid repetition. Repetition, because I think one of the things that prolongs the meetings is Carmen, Eric, Ned, all did this all the time saying, don't repeat other comments. If you've already heard it, don't get up and say it. People just do it anyways. And so at some point, I don't know how this guy in North Andover does it, but maybe he really brings the hammer on the people who repeat.
People don't talk at that meeting.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
But I think we should give the moderator, encouragement and license to cut
Yeah.
people off if they repeat.
So I think, there's the substance of both what Eric has written and your suggestion as well. I think, I'm thinking about Eric's comment of, hey, I just added this stuff, we haven't really talked about it. And so I'd like to talk about that section explicitly.
Okay.
So I forgot to call that out explicitly, let's come back to that.
That's
Do we have a consideration section?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 'cause
Okay.
That's one of the comments.
Yeah, okay. Let me go to you first, Sharon, and then.
Well, my only question is, it said something about primary audience would be the moderator after Carmen. Why wouldn't the current moderator also be the audience for what we're gonna deliver?
Mhm.
That was the only question I had, like,
Yeah,
why wait?
yeah.
And we could talk about it, but that was my question.
part of
My
my,
suggestion was to make that a little more general, so that it doesn't call out the current or future moderators, but.
Yeah, it's just recommendation of the moderator, right?
Well,
Whoever
the
that is,
moderator.
yeah, we get our report. But yeah,
this goes back to, the discussion 2 or 3 months ago. I think it was actually with regard to the use of clickers. And I was trying to reflect what I thought a lot of people felt at that time. There was some hesitancy, understanding that it's completely in the moderator's discretion. A number of people reluctant to even make a recommendation to the moderator. So this was very, very gentle language, and clearly Carmen, after 10 years, has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of sense of comfort zone. I'm personally completely comfortable recommending what I think should be done, you know, to anybody, and starting yesterday, but so I put that in as we know that a new moderator will be open to all suggestions, and I added in there, Carmen commented on the earlier draft, you know, we also should encourage the new moderator. And by the way, when you say new, you know, we're actually talking 3 town meetings from now, because Carmen is 2. But encourage the new moderator. There's a brand new version that's of Town Meeting Time, which is the guidebook for moderators, and significant revisions, huge amount of work under Carmen's leadership, and obviously we want the new moderator to look at that. But I'm completely good in saying, in taking out that the language of future moderators and just saying for moderators, if that's the consensus.
Sure. Yeah, let me go to you, Kristen, and then I'll have something to say as well.
That would be my recommendation, because I think it makes it a little more general and applicable. I mean, we're in it and we're talking about last year and things like that. In theory, somebody might read the report this year and then not again for another 5 years or 10 years. So I want to make sure it's kind of generally relevant whenever people read it. And we can have more about meeting efficiency. You don't want to talk about specifically about meeting efficiency right now, right?
Well, go ahead.
I mean, well, one, how about the use of a gong or a buzzer? No.
Well, it's a gavel. I think we have a gavel proponent in the room, so.
That doesn't like it.
Tractor.
No, but joking aside,
Yeah.
I think that the recommendation in terms of, it's more like a negative connotation, like cut people off, which is a totally reasonable thing in response to what we're hearing is the repetition is kind of an, impacting people's experience. But one of the things that I want to make sure comes across is that the point is to encourage more inclusion, to have more diverse voices heard. And so if we have kind of repetition either of speakers, we risk that there's fewer different voices heard. So I wondered if that could be framed in the positive, and also in the meeting itself. You know, we know that you have, the moderator can, know that somebody has a lot of points to make about each of these things. And also, people want to have their voice heard, even though their point repeats. We can keep in mind that the point is to maybe hear from as many people, different voices as possible throughout, and while reducing the repetition of points. So that was just kind of my suggestion about. And then the other aspect, and I haven't made this comment before, so I don't know how other people feel, is that I wonder if we should include thoughts about how these recommendations would be evaluated. And we talked about that a while ago.
Yeah, you brought that up.
And like maybe early on, but, and while we might not specifically make a suggestion, considering, our whole point was to make things, more inclusive, more efficient and, responsive. Do we want to look at that year over year or in 5 years or whatever? And the reason I say that is because I think we're still gonna be faced with the same thing. People say, this meeting is not representative, it's going too long, like we're still gonna see the same I think, outcries and just kind of being ready to respond to those, not this committee necessarily, but perhaps the moderator, perhaps the select board that says, these are the things that were looked at. You know, let's even anecdotally see how effective they are or something, but at least something that says, these are our best recommendations at this point, knowing that the weaknesses of the meeting still exist, and we are likely to get the same feedback. And yet, this is kind of the best democratic alternative we have, and works even better with the full understanding of participants and things like that, so.
Very good. I think that sounds perhaps, Eric, like a paragraph toward the end about how do we know what effects these recommendations will have. The other thing it suggests to me, so Katie and I are still working on a standing survey, revising a standing survey. So that I think is relevant here as well. So with respect to this section,
So can I just make a comment on it? I think it's a great idea, because that is something missing, and the draft conclusion might be a good place to put it.
exactly.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
that's a good idea.
Yeah. So thank you. So I have a comment though. I think, so this section, on meeting efficiency, other considerations, meeting efficiency, speaks to, again, the considerable judgment and discretion employed by the moderator to manage meeting. And so the tension, right? Well, you know, the tension, I'll say a different tension is that a lot of us don't get what the moderator does. Like, why don't they do something? Why aren't they doing something? Or why did they do that? And, you know, I think that gap is important. When we go back and look at the open comments in the survey, a lot of folks were very critical of the moderator. Again, for perhaps not really appreciating that work. So I think that material belongs in this report. Like, don't think belongs in the report, but would be better in the supplement are the 9 points, the 9 specific points for the moderator to consider. The reason I say that is, again, you know, the substance is fine, we could talk about it, but we haven't talked about it for one. Two, I think going back to how we talked about making recommendations around deliberation earlier, we were very careful not to be prescriptive about what the moderator should or should not do. And here we've gone right over that line and have these guidelines, and maybe they're good, right? But I think what happens is that people read the report, they read these guidelines and think that's what the moderator should be doing. And that's not consistent with, I believe, how we've approached making other recommendations for the moderator. So my feeling is that this material is good, but would be better in a supplement rather than in the body of the committee report.
And I have a comment to that, but I don't know if you want to go to Chase first.
Yeah, sure.
Something about the report itself.
So go, well, let me, you know, does anybody else have anything to speak to on this issue around the question around the meeting efficiency material?
Well,
Yeah, let me go to Alice, please. And then, please.
So my only concern about it is that we haven't made these decisions as a group. We went back and forth on how much time each speaker should be given. We said 1 minute, we said 2 minutes, we said 3 minutes, no more than 4 minutes. And we never said 1 minute.
We never did.
So to me, that one just feels a little too strict since we hadn't actually timed what 1 minute says. It's hard to create.
We chose not to endorse that, in fact.
Well, we didn't, I'm not sure we chose not to, but we didn't decide to. So I just think we have to be cautious and, you know, the things that we're putting in there, that we are making as strong recommendations that the moderator should do these things. That's the first one that stood out most to me, is that because we never really finished the conversation on that one, I'm thinking that the others we probably may not all agree yet, and maybe we don't have to agree, but we should at least agree in principle that these are ways that could help. But the 1 minute to me stood out.
So, I mean, you know, yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, Eric, you have a comment.
Two, actually. One is, I agree, absolutely. We don't have a committee consensus on the 1 minute. It was brought up at a meeting. It wasn't until I was drafting and going back and looking at the survey results. And somehow, as I look at what I wrote now, between one draft and what you got on Friday, it's not in there, but the percentage of people who said they were more likely or much more likely, or it wouldn't affect them if it went from 2 minutes to 1 minute, was a very healthy majority. It was like 3/4, something in that neighborhood. And related to that, we had lots and lots of comments about people saying they've heard too much from people, or they don't want to hear more debate, and to me, that creates sort of a tension. I think part of the essence of town meeting is hearing other people and hearing arguments. But I think people's frustration with the repeat speakers and the repeat ideas and stuff like that, and the lengthiness, gets translated into sounding like you don't want to hear other people's ideas. So first of all, I think that the survey support was really very, very strong. And second, with regard to the larger point, personally, I wrote that to go into the report, not a supplement. In fact, because again, I think it speaks to so many of the things that people expressed frustrations about in what they said over and over in the survey. It shows we heard them, we're being responsive, we're putting forth ideas. It's all in Carmen's discretion, what and how much to accept or not, and future moderators. But that I wrote it up knowing we had not agreed to it. Or putting it out as ideas for us to talk at this meeting and whenever.
Go ahead.
So that's what I would say is I hear, I hear that we want to come to a consensus as a committee and agree to what's in here. I don't know that we have to agree on every single point. I would say that this type of, these types of recommendations do belong in the report rather than the supplement, because, and I don't think we gave this nearly enough attention during our many meetings, was people said it's too long. And we didn't really substantially look at ways to shorten it.
Mhm.
And so here is one way, whether it reduces, whether attention to all of these things maybe reduces time by 10%, I don't know, perhaps not significantly. But I do think this is responsive to people saying, I want to spend less time there.
Right.
And so these are efficiency ways, and maybe what the sentence, there's a qualifying sentence about the moderator's job. It is really challenging to balance enough deliberation and yet, try to get people in and out as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And also, again, these are recommendations that any moderator these are within the scope of what the moderator does. They don't have to take it into consideration. And if the moderator doesn't do that, then maybe the survey feedback will say, hey, I know, I tell you every year, I feel like my comment to the moderator is 1 minute, people. But that's like me as a personal voter. And so then the moderator can decide what to do with that particular feedback. But I think it's relevant in the report if we all agree to the general sense of it.
Okay, I have a proposal. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make a proposal maybe. So maybe what we do is we have a shorter than the 5 or 6 paragraphs here.
Yeah.
Hey, we discussed it extensively, because we did talk about this very times, efficiency. We didn't come up with specific recommendations for the moderator. However, below are several ideas that have come up through the course of the deliberation.
Yeah.
Right, and then we listen to it.
Right. So
Basically,
those
that-
ideas and not recommendations.
Ideas that came up, discussed,
Right,
period,
right.
and that's it. And that way, it's not pure recommendations, but everybody can see some of the ideas and they can urge moderators to.
Yeah, Keith.
Maybe we could also say in that opening that the committee recognizes that the moderator controls town meeting. And that the rulings that are made get made by the moderator. And to the extent that we're looking to make town meeting shorter, that through our work, we've been able to identify these things that the moderator may wish to take into consideration.
So to be clear then, the sentence, the committee urges the moderator to consider the following discussion management steps, then it needs to change to something along the lines of, these are ideas we've talked about, that we leave to the moderator's discretion.
Right.
It preserves the value of this list of ideas, which is very valuable for moderators and for the public. And doesn't require us to all reach a consensus on 8 or whatever recommendations there are.
Good, thank you.
And when a moderator needs one, he or she will do it and say that it was suggested.
Not my idea.
Suggested in the report. Right, and say, well, it wasn't a recommendation.
Perfect.
So, but it's there.
But
It
that's
exists.
the boundary that we've been
Yeah.
consistently observing.
Yeah.
David Allen, on the topic of meeting efficiency?
On the-
Yeah.
on this discussion, I quite appreciate Parashar's suggestion. Talking to people in the schedule here. I thought that went where it needed to go. Let me notice something. The survey was not a random sample survey. Not draw conclusions from it about what is the general point of view in Concord. Even more than that, almost certainly it is a biased survey. Surveys attract people who don't use those naughty words, that people who are not happy with what's going on. Does not attract people who are supporting buying large and going on. And it's a fundamental mistake for anybody, and certainly not to suggest that they actually know what the sense of the town is, certainly to use this data here to support that. Thanks.
Thank you. Chase, let me go to you and then to Carmen, please. Did you have any comments on meeting efficiency? Now that we've sort of gone down the rabbit hole in that?
I think what you guys talked about makes sense. I'll caveat that my experience is obviously super limited. I get the sense that it's a small cohort of people that speak a lot and say the same things. So I think whatever we can do to arm Carmen with the ability to mute or, move people along or enforce the rules, I think is good. I don't know how we would have surveyed the town in an unbiased way, just to the last public comment. It did seem to me like the comments were overwhelming in the fact that people were frustrated by how much repeat debate was happening. So I think the changes that we've recommended with the consent calendar and trying to limit speaking time and giving Carmen more to, mute people and put them, like, that is responding to the voices that we heard. I don't know how we could have surveyed different to have it not be biased.
Good, thank
So
you.
I think it's good. My overall take is, Carmen, if you feel like this gives you what you need to, I guess, maybe comfortably look somebody in the eye and mute a microphone or tell them that they have to sit down, then I think we've accomplished our goal.
Thank you, Chase. Carmen, any comments, please?
No comment. I think that most of those suggestions are things that I do to one degree or another now, but it does seem to me that it's a balancing act at all times between trying to maximize efficiency, but trying to make sure there is a full and fair deliberation. And it is not possible to please everyone on any of these approaches. So coming down a little heavier on people will really, really, really rub some people the wrong way and really upset them. I guess one wonders whether that's in the end better for the process, maybe. I can tell you that I have had people very angry when I've allowed the meeting to vote on a motion to call the question after we've already been talking for 45 minutes or longer, and there are still people at microphones, and it requires a supermajority vote, 2/3, and it's the meeting deciding, and yet I have had people ream me out for not refusing to accept a motion to call the question. So, you know, I don't really, you know, I don't have any more comment than that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, so I think, Eric, do you have any further questions about specifically our comments or direction with respect to the meeting efficiency section?
I think there's been a lot of good suggestions and I wrote them down, I got them. You know, try to craft that into
Good.
words.
And we would see the next version of the committee report at our next meeting in time for approval, I will say, at our next meeting, which is May 6th, or 2 weeks from now. Any other, you had one comment, David Allen?
Just very briefly, there are ways to do random sample surveys. The committee has, among its membership, someone who's vastly expert at that. Just some of us. Okay?
We applied our best
I'm not
judgment.
suggesting that you should have done, I'm noticing that. And
We did,
personal about this.
yeah,
Is a mistake to assert that somehow you can't do random samples. Of course you can. And Katie is obviously expert in that, but enough from the subject.
yeah,
Sure.
good, thank you.
I would just, want to share, given that comment, that I did hear directly from Katie, who told me she couldn't be at today's meeting, but responding to one of the drafts, said that she strongly supported this section about meeting efficiency and moving things along.
And
Yeah.
that's what I mean, I feel like what the majority of the sentiment is that people want to invest less time. And so somehow, so I think that these directly address that, being responsive to what we hear. And I think we need to continue to, what's in here is the kind of the point of town meeting. Yeah, we hear that you want it to be shorter, and guess what? It's $132 million, I don't remember what our budget is. Takes a lot to, you know, get that done. So
Right.
if we're able to convey that, then maybe people will understand why it takes so long and there's only so much that can be done to shorten it.
So I just, can I just ask a general question on the other
Sure.
consideration section? In the summary, we've got 6 items sort of called other recommendations. And we're discussing one of them, meeting efficiency in greater depth in the other considerations piece.
Mhm.
I'm just curious why we didn't want to discuss, I'm not advocating we do, by the way. But was there a reason, or did it just seem obvious, the other ones about ending meeting earlier and all that we didn't take a half a page of, 3/4 of a page to expound on that further?
I'm sorry, to expound on that.
So we've got the 5 major recommendations, right? And we go into additional detail on
And
section
the
5.
6 other recommendations.
And then 6 others. Those others, we don't go into any more detail other than what we have up front.
I thought we
there's
just did the
simple
rationale.
Actually, there is.
In the rationale.
Yeah, in the rationale section down,
On pages 2 and 3,
Maybe,
right?
oh,
maybe we
no,
did.
there's nothing,
So you got the
in-
primary
in the first
recommendation
5
rationales,
pages.
there's
Yeah.
5 of those, right?
right,
The major ones.
right.
And then we don't have anything on the other 6
In the rationale.
in the
section, I see what
rationale
you're saying.
section, except the meeting efficiency one.
Yeah.
And so that, again, I'm not advocating, and the fact that we're now making this more of a thought section versus recommendations, I feel better about, but I was just curious, was that done on purpose?
Absolutely, and in part because basically everything else in there was stuff we had discussed and either come to a clear consensus on or pretty much of a consensus.
And relatively obvious,
Oh,
right?
Mhm.
Meaning,
but one of the concerns is like in the rationale, I think is where you could have, you know, these were kind of the pros and these are the cautions. So some of the things that are missing is, you know, expanding the consent calendar to streamline it is great, but there's some real practical applications that make that like, oh, excuse me, not the, I'm sorry, I'm grouping the high interest ones. Not the consent calendar, but there's some real limitations to that. You could probably group 3 high interest articles on one night, and that includes the
Right.
budget. And
So-
so like we don't, when we don't have, I guess I thought we were gonna have a little bit more in the rationale section on each of them,
So, I think,
over the relevant ones.
you know, so we're at, this document's about 14 pages. Some of that discussion around, there's a lot more discussion in the draft that I wrote, right? But I think part of the idea was to not have all the discussion.
I'm not,
Bring it down.
I'm not advocating
So-
for having
so-
it more.
I don't want a slippery
No,
slope here.
I just wanted to understand
Yeah,
that, to me, the 5 major ones need the recommendation, the primary rationale. I thought that was great, right? If I'm a reader that comes at this, I've got the 5, whatever, and you're explaining it in more detail. And then for the other 6, there's no detail except the efficiency one. And then you were throwing in the community engagement one, which kind of comes out
right.
of the blue. So I was just trying to understand why,
So,
you see
I
what I'm
didn't know
saying?
what to do with the community engagement because
Right.
there was a separate subcommittee and I was
Well,
not
I
in
know, I
the
think that-
meeting,
So
so
to mind you, based on today's discussion,
language.
that other consideration piece is perfect, because now
right,
we could simply say, oh yeah, we didn't get into the details on the other 6 because they're so obvious. Right? And these are 2 major areas where it requires additional details, they're not really recommendations.
so really it's more of a
Additional food
discussion.
for
It is more of a
thought.
discussion,
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that we can say that with a straight face, and that's all.
Yeah, I think we've achieved that,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's missing if we don't have, the cautions. So,
The cautions around what?
well, like, so for example, like the additional recommendation, so conduct robust discussion of the article merits before town meeting at the hearings. Absolutely, that's great. By the way, there was 11 articles on the planning board hearing,
Yeah,
and the first one took an hour of discussion. And
right,
then 2 other ones had no comments, so there were,
Right.
but I mean, like, so. You know, we can make these recommendations and they're subject to, you know, some practical nature. And so I think, and my only concern is by not acknowledging the limitations,
right,
then we might even negate the recommendation, because people are like, did they not even think of this? You know,
right.
so that's my only concern, is that even if it was like a sentence of,
Mhm.
we acknowledge that this practice is gonna take additional time, you know, maybe there are
Mhm.
multiple hearings or something, or just maybe even, you know, that the moderator might, counsel the chair of who's hosting the meetings to kind of, the hearings to help them or something, and I don't wanna get like too detailed into that, but that's my only concern, is by not addressing, you know, some cautions, we might.
The answer is to better budget the public hearing time. That, when I had a conversation with a staff member about how the planning board meeting was gonna play out, I said, well, how many nights do you think it'll go? Oh, it's only gonna go for, you know, a couple of hours, because that's all we're giving it.
Right.
Well, that's the wrong answer.
And so I think then if we're, you know, counseling this, then I think the moderator does need to help. I mean, the chair of the planning board, we're not moderators, we're, you know,
Mhm.
so maybe there's a little more like, and this would go even better by budgeting the time better, working with the moderator.
But in this case, I think it was planning board, or was it a planning board article? That was the first one up.
It was,
So they
Yeah, I
did
thought it was
that,
gonna
they
be
did that
easy, yeah.
themselves. And good thing too, because better for them to find out
right,
how controversial it was right there. Without saying, no, tell us, we'll see you at town meeting, and then
It's
1,200 of us
yeah.
get to experience that. Better that they, learn the lesson and, in a.
So- How do we make this concrete follow-up? I mean, so
What
Eric,
what I think I'm hearing from, Kristen is that, in the section on rationales, after we have the more extensive rationales on the 5, we would have short, like 1 paragraph things on the 6.
It would be longer than that, and to
Yeah, no,
Patrick's
just a
point,
couple
like
sentences.
some of them might not, need much more.
I mean, the governing trade-off, right, as Carmen articulated, is full and fair deliberation on one hand, efficiency on the other. And that always applies to whatever we're talking about in these recommendations.
Well, I don't know, it always applies to all of them, that's my other point, right, because you could shorten
Yeah,
the hours and maybe it's an extra night, whatever, but.
yeah.
And they're interrelated, so maybe just a couple sentences on each one of them, Eric, use your judgment. Based on what you've heard through the last 9 months.
Yeah.
You've already done that, you've gone through and really, recalled things to put it in context, thank you so much, yes.
Although I think, I just want to suggest that there's a paragraph already in there that,
What pages is it?
alludes
What
to,
page?
I don't know what pages it's, 12. When a voter knows how they will vote, that paragraph sort of says the thoughts that were, how people perceive time, and that we are recommending, or here are some suggestions on how you can manage time differently. And I think a lot of the rationale is there. People feel differently by whether they agree or not agree, or whether they've been to the public hearings.
Mhm.
So it recognizes that in one paragraph instead of under each item.
Mhm.
So it's a generalization, but it gets at, I think, the emotional response to people saying it takes too long.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's an emotional response. It's not a time-based, really. We're not keeping, well,
Yeah.
if an article goes for 45 minutes or an hour before, so let's think about that.
Yeah, I'd like to move forward with assurance that Eric, you feel like you have the information you need.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Other comments on the overall committee report? I don't think everybody's had a chance just to sort of comment overall. Keith, did you have anything?
I was just wondering, apart from just typing it this way, whether there was any thought of having it, that those pages somehow stand out, whether it could be a different font, it could be something different so that the eye sees that they're no longer reading the finance committee's report or something else. I have no background in, design. But there are just some documents that you see that catch your eye. And I didn't know if there's just some subtle little difference that could just
Right.
tell the reader that they are no longer reading the text of the zoning article.
Sure.
That they are now reading something else, and I don't know what the answer is for in doing that in designable black and white.
To clarify, Keith, you're saying
The
the
graphic-
5 pages in the briefing book
Yeah, 5 pages in the briefing.
somehow
book.
set
Is
out
there,
from.
right, is there just some little different thing with design
Mhm.
that could just cause the reader to know that that is.
Well, where is this going to go within the brief book? Is it gonna go
No,
within an article?
The committee report,
No,
but
no, I'm sorry, but this is gonna,
It's a 5
the
page.
5-page brief,
It should be a chapter.
5-page.
So, but is it gonna go front or the back?
I mean, like, it's not in the 1 through 60 articles, correct?
Yeah,
correct.
Okay, so, and
Well,
then,
actually, it's warrant article 2.
that's what I was
It's just to
wondering.
hear committee
Okay,
reports.
all right, so it
And I
is,
suspect that's
well,
where,
let's ask the moderator.
That's to be determined, right? I think really Shannon, the
I
town
wouldn't
meeting
put it-
coordinator, is probably gonna be the executive editor of the briefing book.
but she's gonna need guidance, I mean, from either the moderator or from us. But that makes
Well,
sense if this is
probably
to hear
getting
the
it from
report.
her-
I think ours should all be in gold. Gold print.
Well,
Yeah.
but it's a black and
Gold.
white.
Yeah.
So,
And so I guess that's what I was wondering,
So-
about the 3 sections of it on June 2nd.
So, okay, we're not there yet. We'll come back to that. So Keith, you made a recommendation that for the briefing book, we look at the graphic design, so to speak, of the report, of the briefing material. I can take a look at that
Right.
and see,
If there's just something subtle that we can do
yeah,
so that people just don't,
right.
pass it by.
So much of the other stuff is in Arial, and this stuff is in a different font, it might be enough, just to make it look different, but.
I think most people notice.
Yeah.
If you change the font.
Other comments on the overall committee report?
Just one other comment. The briefing book uses the we and doesn't refer to ourselves as the third person. The body of the report goes back to third person. I prefer the we being we, take ownership of it, versus the committee did this and the committee did that, so. That ought to be a simple change.
Good.
And just so I'm hearing, you're suggesting have the rest, have the second 9 pages also be on the we.
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
than the committee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I actually think it should be the committee. I think the 5 pages of briefing book is, you're speaking to the people getting ready for town meeting. The report is more of a historic document. And I think it's more appropriate to have that in the same person.
Does that imply that the 5 pages that are duplicated essentially between the briefing book and the report, those 5 pages in the report should also shift to the committee? And not-
No. I think having the first 5 pages be the recommendation, the briefing book is fine.
Mhm.
And the change in perspective is, I just think it's appropriate for a report.
Alice, what do you think?
I think I agree with that. That becomes a formal document in the archives of the town collection of things that committees do, and I think the language. You know, if the we doesn't include all of us, because some people may have different opinions about sections, all of a sudden it's there, but a committee can be more universally understood. Those participating on the committee think this in general. I think we as in the executive summary or the briefing book is inviting. And I think that's the intent of the briefing book, is to be more inviting and inclusive in language.
Good, thank you. I agree with Alice. You clear, Eric? Good, thank you. Anything else on the committee report? Chase, you already spoke. Carmen, any comments on the committee report, please? Any showstoppers?
Nope, all good.
Good, thank you. Keith, you talked about the briefing book. Do you have any comments about the report? I feel like I'm losing track of both.
No, I'm, it's after 8 and I'm not really,
Fair enough. So, Eric, I have a few detailed issues. You know, one is the use of 46% reported feeling uncomfortable with non-private voting. I'm gonna go through and just write down where the survey number came from. I think you feel that you have in the text a clear rationale for using that number. I will assert that I think it's a real red flag and it shouldn't be in a report, but I'll substantiate that.
I'm sorry, can you say? which
Yeah,
thing?
in discussing, private voting with clickers,
Page 6.
no, still scrolling backwards. Yeah, page 6. 46% report feeling uncomfortable with non-private voting. That number comes from some careful recounting of responses in this survey. I think it's absolutely incorrect to include it.
It's incorrect.
Incorrect, yeah. Rather than spending some time arguing about it now, you'll write it up.
Well, I have to object to that, Mr. Chairman, because I wrote it up and there's a solid basis. And rather than saying it's incorrect, and we'll just send something in writing, I'd like the committee to understand the basis.
page are we on? 6?
I think that's on 7.
7.
It's, of those.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So why is it incorrect? Or why would you not want?
So the survey response, right, out of the 1,000 or so respondents, right, some number, roughly 30% of those said that they don't like they're concerned about private voting.
Yep.
So where did the 46% come from? Well, Eric,
How about if I explain it?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the question, there's a question in the survey. Which statements about town meeting are true for you, paren, select all that apply, close paren, question mark. I'm reading directly from our survey. Now, 1,012, let's round it, 1,000 people responded to our survey. To that particular question with a list of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13 things, only 600 of the 1,000 responded to that question. And it was 275 people who said, I feel uncomfortable. So I believe the two characterizations are both accurate.
Yes.
So that 27% of the 1,000 who responded in the survey said that. And of the 600 who actually answered this question, it's almost half. It's 46. That's where the number came from. And I can, I think we can discuss back and forth, but I certainly do not agree that it's absolutely incorrect. When the text says, of the people who responded to this particular question, 46% said.
And the narrative actually says both. It says more than a quarter of all respondents, all in italics, indicated they felt uncomfortable voting when my vote is not private. So that's the 21. The next one has the explanatory clause of those who responded to this specific question. Nearly half reported feeling uncomfortable.
So what is this specific question? It's not called out in the text, right? This gives the impression that 46% of the respondents responded to specifically, they felt uncomfortable when they vote is not private. What Eric is calling this question is the umbrella for 10 or so parallel questions. So it's just not correct.
Right, well, maybe.
Would you have an objection if, after saying of those who responded to this question, paren, quote, which statements about attending town meeting are true for you? Select all that apply, close quote.
I think it's a real.
Then it's full information that.
Or
It's
275 people said that of the 600 people who responded to the question, 275 said they felt uncomfortable.
But what
And then
credence?
you put the 46 in that.
But what credence can we give to the fact that some number of people chose to answer any of the questions in that? What they answered was, I do or I don't. What they answered was, I feel uncomfortable about having my vote not be private, right? They were presented with 10 different questions under one rubric, one containing question. It wasn't like they went, oh, I'm going to answer any of these or not. They read through all of them and then went, oh, this one applies to me. So it wasn't as if they were, in a sequence exposed to this thing and they skipped through it. They had a choice to answer the question or not.
I think they had a choice all the way through.
Yeah, it's just all the way
So
through,
what
right?
if I guess I'm concerned what difference that makes? Are you asserting that, so I guess I'm confused about, we can clarify the language, but like, what difference does that make?
Well, it's a really weak argument for a point that's already strong enough. I mean, I think, if you take the point away, Dopey made a convincing case to use electronic voting. David Allen notwithstanding, right?
Few others out here too, but I'm the one who's here tonight.
If you take the point away, right, we still have a strong argument. But this point is built on sand, in my view. So I don't know why you're holding on to it, but I can tell you, Katie
For the
was
reasons Parashar just said and Phil just said.
Katie wasn't
And that I have said.
Katie wasn't comfortable with it either.
Yeah, I agree.
With
So-
the current
so-
language, yeah, but if you modify.
He's not comfortable with this point or that question. One of the reasons why only 600 out of 1,000 answered it, because it was a pretty intimidating question. 10 choices, what does this mean? It takes
We
a lot.
don't know why they did or didn't answer it. All we know is that we exposed them all.
It was a complicated question. So I can imagine that the 600 frankly went ahead and answered it.
I mean,
I
to
think-
me, Alice's
I think it makes-
formulation of the 600 who responded to this 275 said, I mean, That's
Oh, okay,
pretty
look, you know,
improper.
look,
That's
I've
very
raised this,
complicated, who took the trouble to answer this very complicated question, if
so
you wanted to.
I've raised this as a red flag, Eric. You know, you can go, well, I think I'm right, I'm gonna keep it in. Or you can also go, well, you know, Eric's really strongly objected to it. And you can consider taking it out if it doesn't really hurt your argument. All right, I'm gonna spend time on this, I'll go back and look at the numbers, I'll think hard about what you did. I'm gonna spend time on this, but I can tell you that given what I know about doing data analysis and statistics, this is bogus to me. It weakens the argument. So all I'm saying is, I don't like it, and I'm happy to follow up on it.
So I hear you loud and.
Call the question.
Excuse me, a minute, when.
Two-thirds vote.
I
All right,
would say,
so moved.
You personally feel very, very strongly. And what I said when we discussed this is it seems like we should hear what the whole, it's not just your perspective versus my perspective, and one of us has to say, uncle, this is a report of this committee.
Right.
And what I've heard from Phil, from Parashar, maybe from Kristen, I'm not sure. Question caller, there's an extension.
Yeah. So you haven't heard,
Tuning out, I mean, the take it outside.
yeah. So Katie commented, you need to go back and review Katie's comments on the draft. And we need to get a real opinion from Katie, who's the epidemiologist, and statistician on the team. But I'll bet you a nickel you're wrong,
And,
but yeah, go ahead.
and so I would say, I agree that, you know, showing that the direct response is 27%. I would support removing of those who responded to the specific, that last sentence. Because I do think that there's enough in here where you say that privacy is an issue, and I think I think the 27% is an accurate reflection of that. So I guess I would leave it at that. Which still supports me. The main movement was for privacy, and we still made that recommendation, even though whether it's 27% or 46% of the people who responded. So my vote is to remove that because I don't think it adds anything to the argument.
I will just say, again, dealing with statistics and survey results professionally, I think if you characterize that 46% correctly, both are true. And so if the objection is around a specific question, maybe Katie can suggest a way that she feels comfortable characterizing that 46%. Because I do believe it makes the argument stronger.
I guess my question to Katie would be, do you mean that since only 600 people answered it, every single response in this, for this question is bogus?
Yeah, we need to go back and rescale the entire survey.
I'm sorry?
We would need to go back and rescale.
No, why
the
is that?
entire survey.
Well, you don't have to rescale it, as long as you give the qualifier of those people that responded to this, and we can clarify what the this is, you can just say that, 46%.
So someone's gonna read this and they're gonna walk away with 46% support for clickers.
Yes,
I
they
mean, for
will.
privacy. That's gonna be the walkaway number.
Oh, we don't know the other 400 people thought.
Bother to respond?
Since we don't know what the other 400 people thought, that's the only data point, is you have 275 of 600.
You have 275 out of 1,000.
So,
Well, the other way
Well,
to
the other ones
characterize it
didn't
is
care enough to answer
275
the question, so.
yeah. So I think both actually present
Yeah.
both sides of it. Yeah, 275 out of 1,000, but of the ones that did want to answer it, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and so it sounds like what we're trying to decide is what to present. Do we want to present that it's almost half that for whom, privacy is an issue? Because that would be the argument for keeping this in here, is that you're trying to kind of make an argument there's larger sentiment about that. So, and I guess I would disagree with kind of that rationale for including it.
I think again, it gets to the choice of the words, right? And so you're just presenting the facts. And people can
No.
infer what they want about why the other 600
Well, then I
didn't
guess
respond to any of those
27%.
questions. Right?
Well, then
Of course, that's my point.
Yeah, so.
Some people might say, well, it's only 27, and others say it took the time, it was half.
And a similar survey from 30 years ago, reported you know,
30%.
around 30%, right? I mean, that's the number that they used. That was the
But
basis.
that's a, I'm not gonna, I don't think we need to sit here and figure out what they did with 20 years ago.
I just have one other thing to say. I think that without the 46%, 27% understates the support for privacy.
But how do we know? Like, what makes you say that?
Because 46% of the people who bothered to answer that question said they were for privacy. If you just tell people that 27% supported privacy, that's not really true, because 270 said no, but only 600 bothered to answer. So the 270 isn't really a reflection of the overall survey. It's a reflection of.
All you know is that 275 out of 1,000 people clicked that question. That's all you know.
No, I know
No,
that
we-
600 answered.
Don't we know
Yeah.
that a significant portion of the community has that concern? And forget about the numbers, don't.
But it understates it. It sounds like only a quarter have it.
Right.
And half of the people who actually bothered to answer have that concern.
Let me read
So
you
if you
this.
don't put both, you would say, gosh, of the people who answered the survey, let's see, 730 were against privacy. If you want to be misleading.
That would be misleading, right? Because if they didn't respond to that.
It might be helpful to hear actually what Katie wrote, because I've been able to find here her written comments. She says, I'm having trouble figuring out how this is different from the 27%. Is this just among non-respondents? If so, I might just say something to the effect of, quote, of those who responded to this question, 46% reported feeling uncomfortable when their vote was not private.
That's what it says.
And that's what you.
That's what
That's what you wrote.
That's what you
And
wrote.
that's what he wrote.
Well,
So she's
So that came
not
from
saying this is
Well,
Katie.
bogus.
but this question is still not clear.
So we
about
can
it.
clarify the question, that we
Right.
can clarify this question piece of how you would want to phrase it. We can ask her to clarify those two words,
And,
this
and,
question.
and again, I think the point that you're trying to include, you're trying to make is say that this committee thinks that there is more overwhelming support for privacy than maybe appears based on the, well, I mean, there's a reason that you're trying to include it in this way.
Because I think it understates it if you just give them the 27%. Because that doesn't explain, but that includes almost 40% of the people who didn't bother to respond at all.
I mean,
So
either way, what I heard was we're recommending clickers primarily for privacy, and I think the report does a great job of capturing those three things, Parashar, that you summarized for us. And I think that's really important, right? You know, accurate vote count, privacy, and something else. And so I think that's what comes out in the report. And then this is some data to support, whether it's 27% or 46%, we still made the decision to do clickers primarily for privacy. See, I think.
Timing was not going to be improved.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't, and maybe even in spite of the fact that 27% of people, you know, we took into account kind of the greater sentiment and so I don't think a second statistics to support the 27%.
I don't know that it supports the 27. All I'm saying, I think look, we're just presenting both facts. So, and people somebody that doesn't like voters is gonna point to the 27% and say, yeah, well, you did it despite the 27%.
Yeah,
And somebody that supports it will say, yeah, but the ones that cared, half of them support it, so you agree with their.
And others will say that the survey.
The other
is
half
not
doesn't care.
everybody in the town, so it's.
Oh, that's true, we say that
There's another
ourselves.
thing to say, if it was 30% in 1996 and it's 27% now, you could say,
it's the,
my gosh, the percentage supporting privacy has gone down by 10%. I mean, there are all kinds of ways you can play with statistics.
There's also one other question in the survey, which is, should Concord use electronic voting at town meeting? And the answer was yes. So the numbers are high, but I don't know how many people answered that. Did 1,000 people answer it? It says 83%. These are percents, right? 83%.
Yeah, that was 843 people.
84%.
out
Versus
of
14.
1,012, so that's not that's.
And I think part of the issue is we didn't
Fraction
really
out of
have a
nine.
full debrief of this. We didn't really have a full presentation of the results in a way where we could ask these questions at the time. So I'm a little uncomfortable adding things, and I would accept if this is Katie's recommendation putting in that, and then I would allow that, or, you know, like, accept that. But it would be helpful to have a meaningful, and understandable survey result presentation in here, not in our report.
Okay, so let's move forward, all right? So, really quick.
When I read that, I said, what is this exactly? That's 47%. You know, you're getting a response of somebody who knows about this. Much more than that. I said to myself, is the committee trying to pump up an argument here for clickers? Take on board that while you're discussing this around the table, this is going to be discussed in Concord at large, most vociferously. And notice that when you do not have a statistically significant survey, which you do not, and you use numbers, and you're suggesting to people they should accept this as reflecting of the town, you're making a pretense. And guess what people are going to say about this report? And if one part of it has got this glaring hole in it where it looks like, frankly, you're lying to make a point, that's not where I want to be as a committee.
Can I just respond, David? Our report says explicitly, survey response, it is not representative of town residents.
That's not what this looks like.
Look, we've got statistics throughout the whole thing. Up front, after we talk about the survey, there's a sentence there that specifically says it is not representative of the town necessarily, because we don't know, period. So for us to make that qualify every time we introduce statistics from a survey we did for good reason, seems to be a bit over the top. So I'm happy to stand up at town meeting and tell people that, but it says that right there in the bottom. So
You're hearing from somebody who, of course, is so particularly close to this, the kind of response that you're going to get from folks. Or are you trying to pump up a result there when it's obviously not statistically significant? Among other things, you could read into 27%, 84%, and not look like you're fooling with folks. But you stick in this where anybody who knows statistical analysis, if 275 people out of 1,000 said they wanted this, that's the only fact you know. You can argue it until the cows come home. But remember, you are folks around this table. There are a whole bunch of folks out there who are going to look at this and say, is this real?
That looks like cheap. It looks like
So
cheap.
if we wanted, with all due respect, if we wanted to pump this up, we wouldn't have talked about the 27%. We would have only reported that of the people that answered the question, 46% did it.
All right,
We're just
guys.
presenting one sides.
I'm really ready to move on with this, gavel or whatever the hell. I think, you know, we've discussed it. I'm still very, whatever. I'll give it some thought. I'll confer with Katie as well. I think, you know, you've heard my view, you've heard the other views around the table. We'll come back to it because I think, you know, when we see the report again, if it's still there, we're gonna talk about it again.
And again, the sentence that Katie gave suggested to my Tuesday version is what you all got. I took her sentence and that's what's in the Friday version.
Right, and she said, if you're gonna put it in there, clarify, right? But you didn't address her judgment as to whether it belongs in there or not. And I think the question about this looking like cheese is, you know, that was David Allen's comment, it's my comment. I'd like to get Katie's view on that as well. I have one other comment about remote participation in voting, which I'll email to you, and this relates to the overall uncertainty around the solutions for an application or whatever that would implement remote participation in voting. It's more than just security. There's a whole question about user experience and ease of use for the people who are likely to be using it. So it's a broader thing than what you said.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
I agree on that one.
Yeah, good, thank you. Let's talk about the town meeting. So this report,
I'm sorry, related to that, there's a sentence underlined in there that says during the, for example, during the pandemic, the legislature authorized COVID-related public meeting participation. Is that underlined because there was thought of removing that sentence? It's on page 10, the underlined section.
I think that's what I set up front with the cover email. There's maybe a half dozen things here, there's either something that we haven't discussed and come to a consensus on as a committee, or it's a rework, so it's sort of calling your
Like, pay
attention
attention or make sure there's-
to, this is not the same as it was in the Tuesday draft that everybody reviewed.
Okay, thank you.
I think we talked about the parallel.
I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything else that needed to be discussed. It was like, if we saw something, we could say it. Thank you.
If you see something, say something.
so we've got May coming up and then town meeting. Let's go to town meeting and then come back to May. I assume, Carmen, I'm gonna ask you.
Weren't you gonna discuss the supplements next, or did you want to skip over?
And the conclusion,
Sorry,
and the
and the
conclusion.
conclusion?
Oh, geez. Let's talk about town meeting and then we'll come to the supplements.
Yeah.
And conclusion.
And the conclusion. Yeah, okay, so town meeting, to my knowledge, and Carmen, I'm gonna ask you to clarify, is your understanding is that we're gonna have 5 minutes or something like that to present the committee's work, is that correct?
Yes.
Is it 5, is it 10?
It's not 10.
Yeah.
1 minute, 1 minute.
Yes.
1 minute.
1 minute per page.
So. I hear 5.
Well, the standard amount of time for presentation under an article is 5. Sometimes we can do less because there really isn't that much to say. And sometimes it's going to be more. But you tell me what you think that you need and we'll talk about it. I will remind you that this committee has recommended that we keep all the presentations short because everyone wants town meeting to take less time.
Okay, fair enough.
And the voters will all have our written report
Exactly.
2 weeks in
A
advance.
ton of
So if
information.
we can't give a summary in 3 minutes,
Yes,
then we're wasting
I-
their time.
Very good, so we're gonna target 3 minutes to present the committee's work.
well, because
and we'll
everything
take
what
five.
you're presenting
Yeah,
is,
because it's,
is
the
not,
report's there.
exactly.
Bullets on a screen, here they are, you can read more.
Exactly, this is where you read more, these were, I agree, 3 minutes.
Great, and the select board will make a motion, a rule of the meeting motion for use of clickers at town meeting. Then in this meeting, that is sure to be debated. I expect that somebody from our committee will speak in support of use of clickers. And I'm thinking that might be you, Phil.
I'm happy to do it, but I think it could be you too, because especially if you're gonna give a summary report, maybe that's the point, you give the report. Because the rule of the meeting motion will come first, I would think.
Actually, it will not. The presentation on the reports under Article 1 will come first, and then next we'll have a little demonstration session with the clickers so everybody knows how to use them, and then the motion will happen, and that will give people the context of the report, the understanding of how the clickers work, and then they will be in a better position to vote on that rule of the meeting.
Okay, so Eric will have given his report by then.
So the committee will have given its report.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And we will have said, we like clickers, A, B, C, and D.
Already. So we
And
don't
then-
need to say much more than we support the select boards.
I imagine, I don't know if we need more than that.
But I think the chair should do that.
The chair.
I think it's
Yeah.
appropriate for the chair to.
Yeah, I agree.
The work of the committee's consensus is to support these.
Yeah, especially if we're only saying that you've already given a report on the overall
So
recommendation.
the chair supports clickers?
And is that
No,
only if?
The committee
if-
supports.
the committee.
If,
The
is that
chair- the chair does it.
The chair says,
The chair says.
the chair committee supports.
But is that, does that need to be a separate during, the motion, if you have just said it in article, in your presentation?
We
Or-
support the motion. That's what he's gonna say.
Okay,
I
so,
think that might be in the briefing book, right, when it says,
It's definitely a regional book, right?
but somebody's gotta stand up. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Eric may differ with me, Carmen may differ with me. As we're starting the meeting, generally, the rules of the meeting are announced, all in favor, say aye, aye. The next rule of the meeting. I don't believe there should be a lot of discussion on that, contrary to what you. So, rules of the meeting are just to get going.
Right.
And, so that's my position is,
Sure.
if I were the moderator, I don't know how Eric remembers his introducing the rules of the meeting, but they were fairly perfunctory. No motion tonight will be taken up after 10:30. Passed, yes.
I agree completely with what Ned's saying, but I believe that this year, this one is in fact, a controversial one for a number of people on whose behalf David has spoken, and so, I do not believe it'd be something that, akin to the consent calendar where we just say, oh, okay. I believe that there will be people that will wanna speak against this proposed rule of the meeting, so it's very unusual, but.
So, let me
backtrack.
backtrack for a second. Who's gonna present the committee report? Does anybody really wanna do that?
It should be you.
Yes,
the
yeah.
chair.
It should be you.
You.
Are we good with that?
Yeah.
You're the chair.
Yeah, okay.
Are you good with that?
Yeah.
Look, I talk all the time, right? I mean,
Great.
blah, 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 blah.
Minutes.
First, you'll time yourself ahead of time. And
You write it
down
and
to
you
3
send it
minutes.
back.
28 pages. Okay, good. So I'll present the committee report in under 3 minutes. If we need to have a statement of support or further argument in support of clickers in the context of the clickers of the rule of the meeting motion, I'll prepare for that, and if necessary, I'll speak up.
Can I just ask a technical question of the three moderators here? They're so perfunctory. Do we actually have a meeting of the rule before we start that says we're gonna use the colored things?
Do we have one?
Do we actually have we actually have a rule of the meeting that says we're gonna use these ballots? Do we actually say that every
That's a
year?
good question.
No, we don't, we just do
We just do it.
it. Tradition.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was trying to remember. So
That's a good point.
my question is, if we just do it, how is the voting gonna occur for the first set of questions before we get to the, is it a chicken and egg thing? Can we just start the clickers and then get objections, or are we gonna use paper and then throw the paper away and go to the clickers?
This is up to Carmen.
Carmen, what's your thought on that? Like, what's your sequence there?
Do you mean are people going to use the clickers to vote on the preliminary motion?
Yeah, because it's likely to be controversial. So are you gonna start the meeting off with an introduction on the clickers and how to use them in practice? And then we're gonna actually go into the formal part of the meeting where there will be debate on using the clickers for the rest of the meeting? Is that what you're envisioning? Or are
So
you envisioning paper first?
Parashar will have some preliminary motions like the election of the deputy moderator and the no new business and so forth. And I wouldn't envision taking a motion like that ever using clickers because it's just so perfunctory. You can almost do them on a voice vote. but I agree with Eric Van Loon. On this one, people are going to want to talk about it. And so we will not have used the clickers before we have this rule of the meeting vote. And then I fully expect that people will want to talk about it. And I don't think that's inappropriate if people want to talk about it. And then we'll take a vote. And I think that we can take the vote either way, using clickers or using paper voting slips. I'm not sure that it matters.
Okay, I was just wondering which direction.
Yeah, and you know, I don't anticipate that it's going to be a vote that's hard to call.
Good, thank you. And then, Eric, I don't.
I'm sorry, we're just, my head's still going back to the statistics.
Me too, me too. So, Eric, the remote participation voting, on rule petition article, you'll present that at town meeting?
I'm prepared to do that. I have suggested to members of the select board that since the select board is moving it, and our reason for asking them to move it was that the motion come with the official imprimatur of our elected board,
Yeah.
that I have encouraged one of them to speak to Article 27. That happened to be during the parade, and they said, well, we're not doing official business right now. And I said, of course not.
Partially down the street.
Think about it, yeah.
It's
So-
an open meeting,
Yeah.
we're there.
I think that they will be discussing that at the next meeting, at some meeting. And I said, my understanding of the sort of the will or the preference or the recommendation of our committee, since we asked them to sponsor it, is that we would want them to present it.
To save time, let them present it and note that we recommended it.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
We don't need two speakers on it.
Yeah, good. Oh, so we'll see about that then. Thank you. Thank you for following up. Other stuff in May, I maybe don't want to spend time on this now, but I think, you know, getting a word out about the committee's work into the bridge. Maybe that's, I can email the editor and say, hey, you know, we'd like to maybe get something in and see what she decides. But then that would be, you know, a short piece or potentially an interview.
Parashar had a very interesting suggestion on this, and that is talking to the bridge and see whether, as sort of not a letter to the editor, because that's 250 words, but our whole briefing book summary, those 5 pages is like 500 words. And whether they would just print that. So in addition to people having the briefing book itself
Do you mean the executive summary, that one page?
No, that's the 1 page.
That's the
We're
one,
talking about the
5
5
pages,
pages.
500 words. A column.
You might have to cut the 5 pages back a little bit.
Yeah,
Sure, but the idea, get as much of just those words. I mean, we worked on it. It's there. It's been.
Does somebody other than you want to take a follow-up with Celeste to see about getting a piece in? Not Alex. Alex can't.
I'll do that. I'll do it.
Okay.
I'll follow for there.
And then they also be interested in writing about it, and they ask questions, you know, here are the recommendations. We've been waiting for a year for the town meeting study committee
Right.
recommendations, here they are.
Okay.
Yeah,
They may want to do it in a different format.
And what I would love if they did that was for them to kind of go into the town and see what else people think about that. Because we're
I
kind of.
presume the newspaper would do
Right.
a
Exactly.
pro-con side by
There
side.
can't be any cons to what we come up with.
I was thinking more feedback. What do you think?
I mean, they would
so,
they
okay,
either
so,
take it as is, or they could choose to write a story.
Yeah. I'll reach out.
so actually maybe I'll reach out.
You can reach out to her.
I'll ping Celeste and see how she might want to engage.
Yep.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then the recommendations are out, and then see how she wants to do it.
Good, thank you. Chase, you're my dream for making short videos. I don't know if that's fair or not. But I think, if we're gonna do any kind of video work, if we, for example, take, turns reading pieces of the report on camera or whatever.
That sounds horrible.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's probably a different approach.
Yeah, so.
Right.
But, if we wanna think about doing any kind of video work in May, that's coming up really fast. So I wanna throw it out there and see if there's any engagement with that.
What would be the
before-
deadline for submission on that, Eric?
Well, really anytime, right? I mean,
Anytime in May.
anytime in May. We're done as a committee on the 3rd, right, of June. So, and, we can, as a committee, we're done. So, I think that, to do a rough cut of a video, before the committee closes with the idea that maybe Minuteman could do the finished work and editing, or that at least we could, as a committee, approve the content of the rough cut. That sounds like the timeline to me.
Don't we need a couple of weeks for the video to be out so that people can see it?
I mean,
before
yeah, it
town
depends
meeting?
on kind of what the
It's gotta go
purpose
viral.
is.
Well, yeah, right, to the point about purpose, right, is it to inform people in time for meeting? Is it to inform people in general about the work of the committee? So to me, the lifetime of the video would be longer than just, the time up to town meeting.
I think so.
So I take a longer view as to the lifetime of the content.
Then we can do, if that's the case, we should do it after town meeting.
Yeah, except it won't be a we after town meeting, it'll be a different role, yeah.
So Chase, if you take that on, I
Do
would
it the
like
day
to
after.
work with you on that.
Yeah, just for clarity, is the goal to talk about the committee itself or town meeting holistically, or both?
It could be both. I mean, going back to the, it could be anything, right? But I think, the work of the committee makes sense in a holistic context of town meeting. And doesn't make any sense at all if you know nothing about town meeting. So I would expect that maybe there's some material on what town meeting is about, what's a legislature, in a town like Concord, et cetera. And then, some material that specifically focuses on what people say about town meeting now, and what we as a committee did to try to make it better.
We can do a reenactment.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or just let Mr. Bean could
Hey,
go over
this,
that.
wait a minute. While Ned is here, Ned, you used to do an actual training, right? I wonder if there's any kind of snippets that we can capture.
There should be a DVD at the library of that, which I haven't
DVD
got.
or VCR?
But anyway,
8mm.
let's, depending on how deep we get, let's see if there's something we can read from there.
No, I think that's a great idea. And having a couple of different moderators, talk about town meeting, all three of you maybe.
Mhm.
Oh, wait, I thought Chase was gonna be the star of the video.
Oh, maybe,
The other audience.
he's just gonna mix up different voices and faces.
Oh, is that what you're doing, Chase, or are you actually gonna be on camera?
No, I was going to use background footage of certain things. My assumption was we were not going to be able to get people in a room and record them saying anything. So my plan was to use text script and then stock footage of Concord and photos that we have available. The idea would be like, what could we produce without having to get people in a green screen room and film them?
Yeah,
Okay.
Good idea.
yeah,
There's a careful of copyright.
yeah. So thank you. Moving on to supplements. So, my concept of supplements is that we'll have a bunch of stuff on the website. There'll be something, a page in the committee report that links to stuff on the website. And you'll be able to go to the website and say, look, here's the committee report, here's some related material. And what I've presented in terms of the list of supplements, a lot of the stuff has been written already, some of it hasn't. The reflection bits, making sense of town meeting, is how I'm thinking about running with what was part 2 of version 5 of the committee draft and of the report draft. And frankly, I'm not sure what the need is for that at the moment. But I'm planning on spending some time and writing something if I feel that there is a good reason for it. Eric and Orange here on the work of the moderator was my reaction to the material that you had and the draft of the committee report about what the moderator should be doing. So you could strike that since we decided to keep that material in the report as ideas versus a recommendation.
I thought a bunch of the conversations sort of bring that in, and I wrote down things that Carmen said also,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
That could
good.
be.
That's good we talked. I have a table of recommendations. It might make sense to have punch lists. I've distributed those before in meeting packets. Punch list for the moderator. I don't know if we need this or not, just what we recommend for certain audiences. So it's a nice to have. So here's a big question, right? Phil, you wrote 2 briefs. Alice, you wrote a brief in representative town meeting. And I still don't know where FinCom has come back. Parashar, you wrote up some comments around FinCom stuff. I don't know where Eric and I forget his name. Who's writing the report this year? Yeah, Don. Krupka, yeah. I don't know where they came back with respect to the stuff that I sent them, but do we want to have these briefs available as supplements to the report? I think so, because the work has been done, and they're part of the knowledge we've created for the work. But I'm very happy to, for folks to go, well, Alice, you could go, no, I don't think so. So really, I think it's a question, maybe we don't answer it tonight, but it's a question for the individuals who did that work, but how they want it to be preserved.
Just to call people's attention to a thought, in the thing that I sent out today that had a draft conclusion. There was also the suggestion that we make a distinction between supplements and appendices, because I think that there are a group of things, like your reflections, Eric, like Katie on the survey, like the 3 write-ups that you just mentioned. I mean, those are really, and 1 or 2 other key things like the Concord Town Study Report from 20 years ago, that gets sort of an elevated status. And then the appendix is going to be everything that's on the website, which maybe all the meeting packets. I mean, I don't know what goes in archives and what, but the thinking that appendices could be all kinds of documents.
I think of appendices as providing evidence to support the claims of the main body of the report. And so, for example, the survey report from Katie categorically would be a good appendix for the committee report.
I just used the exact opposite of labeling. I mean, I was, because if we are going to have supplements, I was thinking supplements would be things that are really tied to the report, whereas appendices would be the Acton report and the Wayland report and the West.
So let's not get stuck on that, because there's collateral stuff, right? Some of the collateral stuff might be necessary to support the claims of the report, and again, I come back to the survey. Other collateral stuff, Eric, blah, 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 make this into a meeting, may not be necessary to support the claims of the report. We could argue back and forth about that.
So, Eric, I agree with your characterization of appendix. The survey should be an appendix.
Yeah, for sure.
The Acton League of Women thing, appendix, etc. I would like us and urge us to be careful about other material, regardless of whether we call it supplemental, etc. Because it's just one more body of work to check to make sure whatever we're saying there is not inconsistent with our report, unless we clearly somehow labeled it as, hey, this was pre-report work, and just leave it at that, right? Because there may be some things in there that we have said that either didn't make it in the report or contradictory to what made it in the report. And you don't want people picking through there and saying, well, you said this here and you didn't say it here. So just some thought of how we head that off.
So how to qualify this stuff?
How to qualify it, or maybe just limit the kind of stuff, like the briefs and stuff, I thought the 5 pages adequately provided good rationale.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
they distill, I agree with Patricia, less is more. There's less things to be targets in case there is anything inconsistent after bid. But the briefs, for the most part, my two briefs were adequately summarized by the draft that Eric and Alice put together. You know, they have the essence of it, and I don't think really, you know, a longer version of it really helps that much.
And even the summary tables, I think, I don't know to what extent they would be different than what's there now, because now it's much tighter focus.
Mhm.
But if we do develop something, I would encourage us, cut and paste. And not try to come up with any new verbiage, because
I
otherwise.
sent you a recommendation.
You did, and we talked about it,
Yeah,
and we said, let's see whether or not we need it anymore.
right,
And we decided it with the the 1 page and the
Right,
4 were pretty
right.
tough,
right,
right? So just urge us to be really careful about
sure.
inconsistencies.
So I think for our next meeting, I'll try to have quote unquote a rough cut of everything that might be a supplement or appendix. And we can look at it case by case. I think that might be a bit of a stretch, but I'll try to do that. Chase, you know, the proposal that you put together, you and your friend George Paul Thomas, put together for the engagement, I think would make a really nice supplement to go along with the committee's work. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like it's good to go, I'd be happy to.
You know, look at it in terms of audience, right? Somebody in the town manager's office, or somebody, you know, on the select board, would look at that, look at the different ideas and go, huh, you know, maybe we want to organize a task force around this, right? So, you know, that document, you know, needs to sort of have a little bit of stickiness for a potential audience who could be a champion. So think about it that way.
Yeah, the idea behind it was to throw a lot of this at the wall to see what would stick, rather than be prescriptive, knowing that we weren't going to, you know, be the ones enacting it at least this year. So
Right.
I'll take the pencil to it.
Cool, thank you. More stuff and supplements. You know, I'm working on I did some data analysis around participation. There's Katie's survey report. We'll include raw data. I believe we should include the citizen comments, other data from data analysis.
Including written letters to the committee. We received several committee.
Yeah,
citizen
good.
Committee letters.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Good point, thank you.
But those are where the contradictions are gonna come up. Sorry, that's where contradictions are gonna come up. And
Well,
same with the 76 pages of citizen comments.
We're reporting on what this was the work of the committee. This is what the public told us. This is the raw material, as it were, the signal from which we made our recommendations.
I guess, are they properly part of the report, or they're just part of the committee records?
Part of the committee records, but I want us to be able to point to these things as part of the committee records. Here's the data, here's the comments. We're not hiding anything.
Well, the data,
Yeah, no,
the survey
the
is.
record is the
appendix,
record.
right? That's what,
Well, the survey report,
Yeah.
Katie's analysis
Yeah.
and conclusions of
Yeah.
what we found in the
yes,
survey
yep,
should be an appendix. to the
exactly,
report.
yes, completely
Right.
agree.
The data sets, the
Oh,
spreadsheets.
data sets, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And then there's other stuff, I know we're gonna close in a minute, there's other stuff, Parashar Benchmark Towns Report is something we wanna link to. Certainly with the long reading list, and I think, yeah, so, okay. So Alice, I wanted to go back to the conclusion of the report, you had something to say there, or?
We haven't talked about it. We
All right.
only have 4 minutes, so I'm not sure.
So-
what to do
so,
about it. I think with the report needs a conclusion, we can't
Yeah.
just drop the end.
So again, the action is gonna be that Eric's gonna do another draft,
Oh.
or he's gonna do edits on the committee report. Clearly, we've had some changes to the committee report tonight. Do we have any direction for Eric on a conclusion besides, Kristen's, suggestion, recommendation that we address, how do we know if we made a difference? Yeah, Parashar.
That second paragraph about voters having inclination and not even going, it's a little harsh on the voters. I would encourage us to
I agree with that.
tone it down a little bit, maybe.
We're doing some finger wagging here, right?
I do believe though, ending with the exhortation that we ended the 5-pager or the 1-pager with, that it's ultimately up to you to reminding them,
Yeah,
is a good way to do it. I just felt that was a little bit,
yeah, I'd like to take out the finger wagging.
Let me speak to why I put it in.
yeah.
I think that there has been a consistent theme over the last 7 or 8 or 10 years. Criticism of town meeting because quote, only 10% of registered voters come and so it's not representative. And I do think it's very important to make the point that that's not really the apt comparison. That the absolute top that we've gotten in decades happened to be last week or when our most recent election. It's less than 2/3 of the registered voters. Now, obviously, more people turn out if there's a presidential election, and that's voting at the same time. But to me, that is really the apt standard, so to speak, and is a point that's important to recall to people.
I agree, but I don't think the second paragraph does that.
Yeah,
No, I agree with your point, and we ought to say those words that you just said.
right.
That, look, we've done all this work, previous committees have done the work. We're at 3 or 4% now. Lots of barriers, lots of reasons people don't come. But, we encourage you to come, but let's not hold ourselves up to a high standard. Something like that, I think is fair, but streets with lines with Canada, all that seemed a little bit,
Well,
too many things.
right, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, I do think that there's some way, hopefully we can tell voters to pay more attention, but I guess one of the things that I think we realized in this examining the strengths and weaknesses of town meeting to do our work was that it's a strong democratic institution that requires time and effort and participation. Right, and we appreciate the people who will participate. And if I can't go, then I appreciate that you went there, you sat there the whole time, and so somehow, kind of in that, and also that our recommendations hopefully are incremental improvement. But that's just it, it's incremental, or it's to your point, it's a minor percentage point change, and so we should, keep that in mind. So let's maybe, I'll see if I have any comments directly to that paragraph, but I definitely appreciate the fact that we're not saying these recommendations are gonna make 30% turnout at town meeting. And even if we don't have that, it's not representative. And that's the part that's really the only thing that's missing, because I don't think we fully addressed the representative aspect. But so in trying to do it in the conclusion, I think in a way is reasonable.
I would just say that in terms of moving this along, so giving me actual proposed suggested language
Yep.
is infinitely more
Absolutely.
helpful than we
Absolutely.
got this issue and why don't you come up with some words?
No, what
Yeah.
you just said was great for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. We got it on video too. David Allen, it's 8:59. It's time for David Allen comment.
Frankly, I'm shocked just to listen to what's now been said. Practically the first meeting I came to, which was your second, I made the point that the numbers of people who come to town meeting are just not relevant. It's whether or not they're representative. Lexington, a larger town than ourselves, gets representation, 200 folks there. We can get representation with less than 200. I'm shocked that that's not being reflected here. But you will not be surprised to hear that was not my thought. I just compelled to notice that, and it does feed into what is capstone for. I don't think you're going to take time for it. That's your choice. It's been noted explicitly here, and I appreciate that recommending clickers is quote controversial. And if we look at the amount of time that's been spent in this session, these 2 hours on the subject, that in itself speaks to how controversial this is. And what's come out here is the question is how legitimate I'm going to be really strong here. How legitimate is the committee's recommendations? I'm going to put it in even stronger term. Can the committee's recommendations be trusted? That's what came up using numbers that are not random sample numbers as if somehow they're word from Jehovah on high. Parashard's voice will not be out there in the next month and a half when this is being discussed, and it will be discussed. And I'm the only one who shows up here, but as you are aware, I speak to lots of folks, and they have deep concerns about this. Bottom line is, can you trust it? Especially if you're trying to push with a dodgy stat that isn't random, this controversial recommendation. Now, there are 3 pieces here. I think you don't want to take time for them. Frankly, that's very unfortunate because they will now be taken up outside this room and outside this group of people if you don't take time for them. I made it clear when I came in here at the beginning that I had a set of items. I printed out those pages and I marked up those pages. If you don't hear these, then well, that's your choice.
I'm now confused, David.
I'm sorry.
I'm now confused. What 3 pieces?
I haven't sent them yet. I've been saving it all evening. I've been contributing as we go here, but I've been saving this until we got to clicker.
Are we-
My
Oh, to the clicker discussion, that's what he's talking about. The clickers.
Okay,
Well, I think we should hear him on the clickers. It wasn't clear from the agenda how you were gonna do this, so. I suggest that we hear Mr. Allen on what he wants to say about the clickers. Sure. Portion of the report, eh? Is that what you're?
Yeah, as I said, I printed out.
What pages on this, so we can try.
confused. Well, you didn't speak up earlier when we were talking. All right, go ahead. So what do you have, David?
I didn't speak up earlier because the opportunity wasn't presented straightforward, but there are 3 pieces here, as I said, and it'll take a bit to do it all, but let's go there. As someone has observed here, the committee's recommendation is based on an argument for what we call privacy. And that's where the attention should be. However, because time saving is integral to what's going on, that has to be discussed. Well, despite my choice to get to the topic I just mentioned, that conversation has to start with time saving. Bottom line, given the committee's vote and recommendation 8 and 1 abstention, that virtually all articles at town meeting will be done with clickers. Bottom line, town meeting will be longer than it would have been without clickers. And if you fail to say that in this document, let me report to you the discussion that's going to be held outside of this room and outside of this committee. I pointed out the whole issue here is trust, whether or not we can rely, or whether or not you've got an agenda, your own agenda, and you're trying to push it. There will no longer be any need to move for a secret ballot. All ballots will be secret. That's the only big time saver. Last town meeting.
That counts as well, yeah.
Last town meeting, there were no counted votes. That's the only place where clickers can save time. And on average, you should expect 1 or 2 of those, despite this unusual situation, the last town meeting. And I've done that calculation. I frankly put it out of my mind exactly how it comes up. Let's say something like 7 minutes or 12 minutes or some bloody number like that, because the tellers pretty quickly get up and hand their documents over to the clerk and the meeting goes on, except in the case where the following article is contingent on that. So let's say that there are 2 counted votes. And we're saving what, 15 minutes. And guess what? That's going to be overridden by the amount of time that it takes to use clickers when we could have had the. I'll say again, if you aren't upfront about the facts on town meeting in this document, ain't gonna go down pretty.
I actually think it's in here. There's something about,
Forgive me, Phil, and I'll cede the chair to you in a second.
okay, no, I'm sorry. I'm just-
I have read carefully here, and it's at worst wishy-washy. It doesn't say, it won't save time. It needs to say that blunt. Needs to be very clear on that subject. It's a lead sentence in a paragraph, and then explain why. Now,
Okay,
let's go on to the other two pieces here.
good.
I will again underline the whole issue is whether or not your work can be trusted. And by the 14,000 registered voters outside of this room. There are two matters where clickers impinge, in my view. One of them you reference in this document, and I didn't begin by saying something that frankly I feel very deeply, so I'm going to take a moment to say it now because of other reasons to say what I said. Just because I'm critical here, and I am critical, and I'm being very plain and strong, and I will be outside of this room with the 14,000 registered voters in Concord, and whom I do talk to. We've already talking about this. I am so grateful for the massive amount of work that people around this table and up there on that screen have done. You may think that's a perfunctory statement. It's not in the least. Yeah, I've sat here alongside of you, but I really appreciate it. You really have applied yourself. That being said, what are these two matters with respect to clickers? And what you call privacy. As I say, one of them is addressed in this, somebody pointed out this underlining in here, this paragraph that's underlined. You get to this issue about whether or not folks may walk away with a thorn in their heart because it was a private vote. That's my shorthand phrase for it. And I'm appreciative of that. What I'm not appreciative of is the frankly insulting wording. Unable to discern any factual basis for this concern. You will have lost hearts and minds with that sort of, I'm going to be blunt, crap. Logic or facts, certainly I hope in a community that's as intellectual as this one. I present to you as evidence A, January 6th. Did people walk away from an election?
So Eric, do you know the clause in question?
It's on page,
Page 8.
7.
Yeah, my machine has died. Can somebody just read
Right
the?
here.
My machine is dead, so can you just read it in context?
So while there is no doubt that these concerns are strongly and sincerely held, the committee was unable to discern any factual basis for this concern other than personal perspective or intuition. That's a sentence, right? That you're.
Yeah,
That's
the previous sentence is, another fear is that secret balloting might encourage voting based on individual private interest rather than on the good of the community.
If I could leave that to later, so I appreciate your noting that that's in there. Because the focus right now is on whether or not there is any possibility that folks might walk away with ill will in their soul. Let's look at January 6th. An invasion of the bloody Capitol building in Washington DC because people weren't happy.
So Eric, you've heard David's objection to that wording. Do you have a suggestion there?
Can I ask a question first, David? So is the concern the fact that we're citing people's feelings not being factual? What, I think I understood what you're getting at, and you're saying that we ought not to sort of discount people's feelings. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's not feelings.
Okay, so help me understand.
I'm glad you asked, Parashar, I appreciate it. We're talking about is a function of democracy, okay? As at least members of the committee are familiar, I've written up a page that says this in the plainest possible terms, and I'm certainly happy to circulate that around the committee should you like. I'm actually about to improve it a little bit, give them some discussion around town about it. But this is about democracy. The document leads off with the item that's not addressed here, which is in legislative undertaking, you succeed only if you have deliberation, and if you invite folks to hide their position, they ain't gonna deliberate. You can shot in your foot democracy from the get-go. Because you're saying to folks, oh, no, don't speak up, hide your vote. If folks don't wanna show their position, don't come to town meeting. It's real straightforward. Town meeting is about deliberating. And clickers push in the exact opposite direction. That's not what's addressed in.
So your claim is that clickers adversely affect deliberation.
Adversely affect democracy. They are an assault on democracy.
No,
If
they
you want to-
adversely affect deliberation,
If you want to
and
be-
hence,
Yeah.
and hence damaging deliberation damages democracy.
It's a permission not to participate in deliberation.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay,
that's number one. Number two is the bit that I was already on, which is that once you get down to the vote itself, town means two things. It's deliberation and a vote. And yes, town folk don't know this, I have to get educated to it, I had to get educated to it, but I just can't, and so forth. And fortunately, the committee's undertaken to do some of that, but that's what town meeting is. You talk about it, you must openly express your opposed views if democracy is going to work. It's the only way that democracy can work. In a civil fashion, needless to say, but you don't state your position on one side or the other, democracy has failed. And then when you get down to the vote, what happens? The body politic has in effect to agree that the vote resolves the matter. Those folks who inevitably will lose, every vote will have a losing side, except for again, the votes that are everyone, of course, who turns out. But the point is that the way democracy goes forward is the vote is the decider. When over the last, Lord knows how many tens, hundreds of years now, Concord Town Meeting has voted with their colored papers or whatever the heck they used 150 years ago. When they vote with this thing publicly, together, they come into the thing as a community and they leave it because they voted together, still unified, instead of folks harboring in their hearts ill will that no, I'm very unhappy with how this came out. And it doesn't mean some people won't be unhappy, of course. But this is the mechanism the community has to maintaining this integrity going forward. And I've already pointed out that it's a fool's errand to imagine that people can't walk away and contemplate some really unpleasant things. We've got plenty of evidence of that. Just because we're conquered, don't mean it can't go down. Frankly, in this last election, we saw bunches of that.
Dave,
Now,
you need to converge, please.
These are the three pieces. What I'll notice is that, privacy is not an issue at town meeting. I think it most unfortunate that somehow the committee decided that that was what had to be upheld at town meeting. Town meeting is not about privacy. Town meeting is about deliberation and making votes. And if you can't bring your position out on one side or the other, you're not at town meeting. If you can't agree once you've lost a vote that yes, it's settled by the vote and we go forward together without ill will, you're not succeeding at town meeting. Committee needs to make that clear.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for staying longer for it. Appreciate it.
So the time is 9:17. As chair, I'm gonna declare that this meeting is closed. Thank you, everyone. We got a guy right over here.